So we were in the middle of a piece last time, so just to quickly... Okay, so just to remind everybody, because we were in the middle of a piece and we left off in the middle, in the Rav Alshech's comments on the description of the second day, where it talks about God making the firmament, I love that word, and the discussion of all the different things it could be and why and how. So basically, he taught us a yesod, a fundamental principle, and that is that basically the way he said it was that in a creation like ours, which extends from a spiritual to a physical reality, and it's a steady continuum of constant emanation that goes from the point of the most spiritual in our reality, which somehow is drawn from God's spirituality himself, so to speak, even though we can't really call him anything. He's not really spiritual. He's not anything. Or nothing really captures him, but it goes from spiritual to physical, and it needs successive stages because all the way on the physical end of things, on the material level, the material itself does not have within it, in its essential nature, to receive. First of all, it requires a spiritual animation, something that animates it spiritually, and it needs to have in it built in the ability to receive that spirituality. Okay, so because the physicality cannot sustain itself, and it needs to have a soul. Every level of physicality has a spiritual soul counterpart. So when it came to the creation of the waters, the Rav explained that God it wasn't enough that the waters were split from the middle, and the top waters became somehow primordial spirituality, and the bottom waters became primordial physicality, but they buttressed against each other, and there needed to be distance or space. God had to actually make space for a successive levels of emanation, because you couldn't just have the most spiritual like up against the most physical. There needed to be various degrees that were manifest in gradual worlds in order for spirituality to eventually become physical, and for the physicality to contain spirituality. So that's what we talked about more or less last time. We're going to pick up from Gimel. On the page, yes? Okay, we're going to dedicate our learning to Li'ilui Nishmat Avraham ben Avraham. We are on page Yud Bet in my edition, page 12, the second to last paragraph from the bottom of the page. Okay, Alken, therefore, Asa Shnei Dvarim, God did two things. Echad, first, Ki vayomer Elohim yehi or me'aruchaniyut. So God said there should be light on the first day, and that was the moment of the beginning of spirituality. Vayihi or, and it was light, lahachin choshech achirut olam hashafel, to prepare the darkness, the coarse, gross darkness of the physical world, of the olam hashafel, the lowly world, lekabel koach v'kiyum, in order to accept, to receive strength and establishment. Tachat hiyotam tov vavo kamdubar, instead of being chaotic and tov vavo in their natural state, meaning without this hachana, they were tohu vavo. Va'adayin kirvat Elohim la'aretz, and still the proximity of God to this earth, ta'atzrena, would stop it, would arrest it, milakabel gashmiut mamashi'i, in order to receive its actual physical material form, because it's too close to spirituality. Ki tzarich hishtalshelut olamot, because there needs to be a steady emanation of worlds. There needs to be space in order for physicality to exist, right? It can't be in the face directly against the face of God, whatever that means. Al ken, therefore, laharchik mayim elyonim, in order to distance the upper waters, sheruach Elohim rachefet aleim, because God's spirit is hovering over them, me'al makom she'aretz bo, from away from above the place that the earth is, the la'asos mekomot beintaim, and to make intermediate space, meaning in the middle, in between spaces, l'shalshal hashefa b'hadraga, in order to emanate the divine inflow in various degrees, ba'ofen hakanot aviyut ba'aretz, in a way that the earth, the coarse earth, can acquire its coarseness, that it can become material. Ma'asa, what did God do? Barahu yitbarach bein mayim lamayim. He created between water and water, shamayim, a heaven, or heavens, right? It's always plural form. Heim hagalgalim ushmei hashamayim heim olam hamalachim. This refers to the many heavens that God interjected between the mayim and the mayim. He made the world of the galgalim that we spoke about, the heavenly spheres, ushmei hashamayim, and the heavens above that, which is the world of the angels. Mamatzim ben olam ha'alyon olam ha'tachton, and they mediate between the most upper world and the lower world. Ki b'shtalshelutan, through in their emanating mit'abeh hashef ha'alyon, the high supernal influx becomes coarse and thick. Ad ya'aseh la'aretz l'kabel aviyut, until it finally arrives to the level of earth to accept its materiality. Ki hine, for behold, gam shebiyom harishon nivrahu. It's true that these worlds were created. That also gam shebiyom harishon, that even though on the first day nivrahu they were created, lo huchan mechon shiftam, their ultimate rest, their place of rest, or their ultimate natural state was not prepared, binukuda haru'uy lahem be'etzem, in a manner or to a degree that was truly worthy of them, essentially. Meaning, even though Aretz existed on the first day, it did not exist as Aretz as we know it in its physical form. It couldn't be physical yet, the way it was meant to. Sheyiyu mayim elyonim lamala mehem hashir hahu, that the upper waters should be above them to a certain amount, ad yom hasheni, until the second day, where we're describing now what happened, where God actually separated them. So Shamayim va'aretz were way too close for Aretz to be actually physical on the first day. Vehu, ki lemasha echutan mimuzag ben olam la'olam, to the degree that their quality is apportioned or tempered from world to world, kimefarash lamala, like we explained earlier, sha'al ken, therefore, nivra'u me'atipa imtza'it shebein mayim elyonim latachtonim. The heavens, these heavens, which we're referring to all under the catchphrase of the firmament in the verse, they were created from this middle drop that we discussed before, that was taken from amongst these two types of waters that were intermingled. Al ken ra'a v'hiskin havayatam or mechon shiftam v'makom nekuda emtzayit. Therefore, God saw and He fashioned from their being and their ultimate place with this middle point. In order that through it there should be a way and a quality to accept from spirituality above, and a pleasant way that it could change or turn from the qualities of spirituality, in order to come close finally to be this coarse earth. And this is what the verse is referring to when it says that there should be rakia bitoch hamayim, within the water. That it should be in a place of mediation and interface of air. That therefore there should be some sort of screen, a separation, which mediates from the upper waters. These upper waters are the waters, the flow of divine influx that the Spirit of God hovers over them. To the lower waters, ka'amur, like we mentioned. Okay. So basically, in order for physicality to become the physicality, the material physicality that we know it to be, it needed distance from spirituality, and therefore God interjected in between these two zones a whole world, or a whole ladder of all the necessary worlds to mediate from the pole of the most spiritual to the most physical. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about how perhaps we're going to learn, now that we're in this verse, how the story, the order of the days of creation are a template, a meta template for all of history. Okay. When it says in the verse that God made the firmament, so the verse could have said that God made harakia. Vayas Elokim harakia. But it says et, the rakia. Okay? Aleph taf. And oftentimes we like to view that word as extra, and we're questioning here, what does that signify? So when it says et, that God made the firmament, but also something else. What else did he make that's included in the word et? Shemar beha-et, that the et comes to include or increase, right, the mention, Shmei hashamayim gamhem, the heavens within the heavens, all the various worlds. Shehu olam hamalachim, which refers to the world of the angels. Im harakia, with the dividing firmament. Hu olam hagalgalim, that is the world of the spheres. Remember, I just want to remind everybody, we mentioned this last time, that the Galgalim here are the spiritual counterparts from the luminaries that we see in the physical world, and the Shefa is mediated through them. When we speak about a rakia, we're referring to not just, we could be referring to all the many rakiyas. Officially, according to Chazal, there are 7, but generally it means just the rakia, that's the Olam HaGalgalim. Uferish ha'inyan, the Amro, and the pasuk explains when it says Vayavdil, that God separated. Lomar, to say, Teda, you should know. Lama bara rakia betoch hamayim. For what did God create a firmament within the water? Kidei sha'al yedei kain. So through this, Vayavdil ben hamayim, that God can separate from the upper waters and the lower waters. Sheruach Elokim haita alehem. For the Spirit of God was on them. Lamayim sheha'aretz betocham, to the waters of the earth that were betocham berkiyam ha'ne'amarim, that they were, as mentioned, within all these various worlds. Sha'ayidei hibdalam, that by God separating them, haya hishtashalut shebo, there was the emanation that was within it. Vayomer Elokim yikavu amayim, and then God can say on the third day that all the waters, the lower waters, should gather and become the oceans, etc. V'tera'eh hayabasha, and the earth can be revealed. Kinit abet ayidei ha'avdel, because it became material through that act of separation, kamdubar, like we explained. Uvechlal hadavar, and included in this matter, hazeh matzanu, we find, ra'inu tuvtam, we see a very excellent reasoning, el ha'omer, for the opinion in Chazal that states, ki malachim nivra'u b'sheni, that the angels were created on the second day. Okay, so there is generally two different opinions in our sages as to what day the angels were created. Some say that the angels were made on the second day. This is mentioned overtly in Rashi and the Chumash, where he mentions the reason why the pasuk refers to the first day of creation as Yom Echad and not Yom Rishon. But there's another opinion, and the opinion is that on the 5th day, where it mentions that God created the living creatures like birds, and it says Va'of yofef ba'aretz, and the bird shall fly. That those creatures of flight should fly on the earth. So there's a contingent of Chazal that say that it was created on the 5th day. So now, the Rav says, for those that say that it was created, that the angels were created on the 2nd day, it's very reasonable. Why? Because we see exactly where it is hinted to in the verse. Because the verse said that God made not just harakia, but also et. So the et over here, according to that Chazal, would refer to God didn't just make the firmament, but in making the firmament, he made this whole structure with all these worlds, including the angels who are citizens in the world of angels. Okay? So according to the opinion, Ki malachim nivra'u b'sheni, that the angels were made on the 2nd day, Hechan nirmaz b'katuv. Where is it hinted at in the verse? Ki la'omer shenivra b'chamishi, according to the opinion that says that the angels were created on the 5th day, mifarash, it's straight out in the verse. Ba'amro, when it says ve'of, and the fowl, or the winged creatures, ya'ofef al haaretz, should flap or fly above the earth. Ya'ofef miyutar, that second word, ya'ofef, that should flap or that should fly, is extra. Ela shehu kemadat amar, it must be that it's coming to tell us. Ubishtayim yofef, there's a verse in Isaiah and Yeshayahu that refers to the angels that say that with 2 they flap, meaning there are those angels that move 2 units of movement at a time with flight. So that word yofef is a direct reference to angels. Very good, they must have been created on the 5th day. However, b'mashe kasavnu nirmaz ba'omro es, but that which we have pointed out in our verse where it says the extra word et, Kamdubar, it's as we said, it's referring to the angels. However, according to the opinion that says that they were created on the fifth day, the et over here is not referring to the angels themselves that are created on the fifth day, but the world that they will ultimately inhabit, which was made on the second day. So even if you say they were made on the fifth day, this act of the fashioning of all the various levels of a continuum from a point of spirituality to physicality, all those intermediate worlds included the world of the angels, which were only, according to this opinion, populated later on the fifth day. So that's what the word et refers to, according to all the opinions. V'lihiyot, yiha et al ha'olam, et is referring to the world of angels, v'ya'ofef, and the word ya'ofef in the fifth day, ala malachim atzmam, on the angels themselves. V'lihiyot, hishtalshalut behadraga shava, and so that the emanation should be with equal flow of various degrees. Asayit barach, the Blessed One, made that it was equal from the upper waters to the middle firmament. It was equal like from the firmament all the way to the earth. And through this, through the influx, the divine inflow that emanates to the worlds, where it becomes coarser and coarser, as it becomes coarser, the influx, that world that it's going through also takes on a quality of coarser physicality. Be'ofen, in a manner, that afterwards, the verse says, that now all the waters can congregate together, can group together, and the Yabasha can be revealed. Meaning now we can have a creation of Yabasha, of dry earth, in its state of pure physicality. Shehu heraot etzem gashmiut, that it is now worthy of its essential physicality. Yavesh, dry, mamashi, material, ka'asher haya, like it was. Okay. Vihine, alma shelo ne'amar b'sheni kitov. It does not say. So this is in day one it says that God saw that it was good, and in day two it don't say nothing. Mm-hmm. And day three it says, day three is so good I'm going to say it twice. Mm-hmm. It was good and it was good, kind of like to make up for Yom Sheni. And then every day following was it says that God saw that it was good, and everybody says Yom Shlishi, third day is famous, Pa'amayim kitov, it's double good. Yeah, but what about Yom Sheni? Okay. So the fact that Shelo Ne'amar B'Sheni Kitov, it doesn't say on the second day that it is good. Rabu Berazal, there are many, Rabu Berazal Hadeot, Chazal mentioned many different opinions to address why the verse doesn't say that it was good on the second day. V'asher yera'eh she'asu ikar hu al ki la'nigmar bo malechet hamayim, and the main approach seems to be that because whatever God was doing on the second day was not finished till the third day, so he couldn't say. There was meaning he was stopping in the middle, so to speak. So he didn't say kitov because he wasn't done yet. That seems to be, if you ask a kid in Cheder, they'll tell you that. That's a famous answer. But the question is, why did God choose to end day two in the middle of his job? He could have finished it. Why is he structuring reality like that? That day two is extended over to day three, and day two doesn't get a kitov. And it helps their approach that they say that the reason why it didn't get a kitov is because the work on the second day wasn't done, because on the third day it says twice kitov. One, indeed, when he finishes the work of the water, which was basically started on the second day. And there was even Yom Shlishi got its own stuff that God was doing in terms of the vegetation and the earth and the trees. So that also got a kitov. However, halo yiksha, you can ask, lama lo hishli malechet hamayim hu yitbarach b'sheni v'amar aleh kitov. Why didn't God just finish the work of the water on the second day and say kitov, that it's good? V'lo ye'acher hadavar, don't push off the matter ad yom shlishi till the third day, la'amro bo zeh pa'amayim, to say it twice. Thank you very much. Right? V'tachen, and it makes sense, it's reasonable. Ki hine en safek, there is no doubt. Ki sheshet yamei bereshit hem remez l'shita alfei shnei dehave alma. The 6 days of creation, they are they also hint at the 6,000 years which will be in the world. V'yom hashvi, and the seventh day, El Olam Haba Shekula Shabbat, refers to the coming world, which will be entirely have the character of Shabbos. Okay, so now we're going to scope out, we're going to map out how every day in creation corresponds to the main historical beats of the human history. Nimtza, turns out, Yom Harishon, the first day, Remez, Le'alef Harishon, it is a hint, or it is a counterpart to the first 1,000 years. Shahaita ha'aretz tohu va'vo v'choshev, because the earth was empty and void and dark. Ramaz, the description in the verse is hinting, ki ba'elef hahu, in that first 1,000 years, hayu rishayim machisinu ba'im, the wicked would instigate and move on. Meaning there was just wave and wave generation of people that irritated the good Lord and then expired. Meaning they weren't giving Hashem a lot of nachas then. V'hayu re'uyim ya'alu hamayim al aretz, and it was worthy, they really deserved that the waters, the heavenly waters, would plummet onto the earth, v'yatzifu hakol, and wash away everything, v'yiyeh tov v'vo, and it would return the world back to its emptiness and void, al derech ma'amar Ramzal, like the quote from our sages, shekeshaharasha dorech al aretz, when a wicked person walks, tramples, or steps on the earth, he mitra eshet, the earth itself becomes wicked. Shehu atzli, that to me, what it means, al ki lo raka HaKadosh Baruch Hu haaretz al mayim shelo ketivam. So God stretched out the earth on the waters in a supernatural way. And he did not do that, meaning the whole world was kind of hung in it's miraculous, right? The way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is tola eretz al blima. He hangs the earth on nothingness. That the earth is above waters that are underneath it. And this doesn't make sense. This is against what you would find in the natural law of gravity. And the only reason why God suspended it supernaturally, right, was so that rak l'sheyavdu et Hashem, in order that the denizens of the earth should serve God. V'chein amru, and they also said, Kima shemei hayam givoim, why are the waters of the oceans high? Hu ki ha'elohim asa sheyiru milfanav, he placed them high so that they should fear God before him. Bir'ot b'nei ha'aretz, that if the people, the children of the earth, would see, ki al derech nes mitkaimim, that the waters are suspended miraculously, ve'ein tzarech lipara mehem, and there is no need for God to exact justice from them if they misbehave. Rak lahaniach hadavar el hateva, he just would leave things to nature, v'yerdu hamayim al aretz, and the waters would plummet onto the earth. So the Alshech is characterizing the first 1,000 years of human history as pretty dismal, as being described in the pasuk as tov vavo v'choshech, and this idea of the waters always threatening to plummet onto the denizens of the earth because he has to remind them constantly to behave. V'zeu choshech, and this is a reference and this is when the verse says, and darkness haroges al penei tehom, that it rages on the face of the abyss, lahaloso, to raise it. It's like some sort of angry, bubbling darkness that wants to rise. V'ruach Elohim, and the Spirit of God, hi midat hadin. Remember, Elokim is the name of God that means the trait of justice or judgment. Kvar haita merachefet al penei hamayim, the quality of judgment, of justice, was already hovering over the face of the waters. Lahatzifan al aretz, to dump them on the earth. Kasher heichal b'dar enosh, which is what happened in the generation of Enosh. Shekar lemei hayam, that God called the waters of the oceans. Vayishbechem at shlishei shel olam, and they poured onto a third of the world. Vahayagomer, and that would have been it. But the verse then says, it finishes off with the story of the first day. Elishabe'elefahu, on the first 1,000 years, Vayar Elohim et ha'or ki tov, God saw that the light was good. What's the light was good? That's referring to who? Tzadik echad shu Chanoch. There was one righteous person who justified humanity at that point, and that was Chanoch. And then it says, Vayavdil Elohim et ha'or And God separated the lights. So if the light's referring to the tzaddik, Chanoch, and it says that he separated them, or he separated him, we're of course referring to the fact that God separated Chanoch from the rest of humanity and elevated him from above the firmament to the world of angels. Right? Chanoch became the angel Matat. And through this, he had mercy on his world, and God saw that it was good. Okay, so that's his description of the history of the first 1,000 years and what was accomplished then, and how that corresponds to the characterization in the verse of the first day. Vayom Hasheni, and the second day, Hu Remez Le'elef Hasheni. This is a hint or a mention to the second 1,000 years, the second millennia. The second millennium of human history. Because in the second millennium, God did two great, wondrous, famous acts, historical acts through the water. Remember, the second day of creation is a story of God separating the waters and putting the firmament in the middle. And the story of the second, one could say that the whole second millennium is the story of these two waters. What are those? Echad, once, be'elef hasheni, on the second millennium, v'hu mabel hamayim. That is the story of the mabel, the deluge in the times of Noach. Shahei b'shnat elef v'taf reish nun vav shana. It was 1,656 years, so it's already in the second millennium. Shenis, and the second act, great public famous water miracle, be'elef hashlishi, was already, I guess, into the third millennium. Hu inyan kriyat yamsuf. That is the story of the Kriyat Yamsuf by Gulat Mitzrayim. V'hinei inyan hamabel, the story of the deluge, sheneschabru mayim hatachtonim, that the lower waters they cleaved shel mayinot tahom, the well springs of the abyss, im mayim alyonim, with the upper waters, meaning the description of the Mabel by Noach talks about how both the waters from the deepest abyss sprung up, and the cache of waters in above spilled down. So they were getting it from both sides, or up and down. Ki arubot hashamayim niftachu, the windows of the heavens were opened. Ad shirichem hu yitbarach vayavdu b'neim, until God, blessed be He, had mercy and He separated them. Vayisachru mayinot tahom, and the well springs of the abyss were closed. Vayikaleh hageshem min hashamayim, and the rain that came from heaven ceased. Nirmaz b'yom sheni, that's what it is hinting at in the description of the second day. But Amro, when the verse says, Vayi mavdil bein mayim lamayim, that God separated from water to water, He's referring to the upper waters that came down by Noach and the lower waters that came up. Vayi yavdil bein hamayim, and God separated from the water that was above the rakia. Shehu remez el ma shahaya be'el fasheni, that's talking about what happened in the second millennium, meaning the Mabel. The Inyan Kriyat Yamsuf, and the reference or the idea of the mention of the splitting of the Reed Sea, Shahaya Be'elef Hashlishi, which was actually in the third millennium, Shenitzvu Mayim Kemo Neid, that the waters stood like walls, V'nirei Hayabasha, and the dry land became seen, it was revealed. Nirmaz B'yom Hashlishi, that's actually being hinted at in the third day. Yikavu hamayim mitachat hashamayim, that all the waters should gather from beneath the heaven, el makom achad, to one place. V'tera'eh hayabasha, and the dry land should be revealed. That is a direct reference to the Yabasha of Kriyat Yamsuf. The Alkain, and therefore, l'mashe inyan maseh hamayim shebasheni hayta tsar gedol mod, since the action or the story of the waters of the second day was a very great and terrible thing. It was a tzara. It caused pain. That even though God did indeed have mercy on His world when He left Noach and He allowed Noach to continue the human race, that wasn't enough to stop to create. It was a very terrible cataclysmic thing what happened by the Mabel. Al-Kain, therefore, lo nomer bo kitov. It's very hard for the verse to say, if the second day is a reference to the calamity of the Mabel, it's very, very hard for us to say kitov, that it was good. And that's really, so in a drash explanation of why it doesn't say kitov on the second day, the Alshech has gone into this whole explanation of showing us how each day, right, in the week of creation corresponds to a millennium of the human existence. Okay, and that's why, there you have it, folks, why it doesn't say kitov, because the second day is really a description, a prophetic description of the second millennium and the terrible cataclysm of the Mabul. But if you look at what happens with the water on the third day, shehu remez al kriyat yamsuf, which is alluding to the splitting, the miracle of the splitting of the Yamsuf, shehaya tov me'od, it was very, very good. So and therefore, ne'emar bo kitov, it says on the third day kitov. V'hayot inyan yikavu hamayim, and for regarding the collecting and the gathering and the congregating of the waters to one group. Basheni hayabilti efsha. On the second day, this was not possible. Ki ech yirmos basheni masha hayati liot be'elav hashlishi. Meaning that's what happened. Meaning if the Kriyat Yamsuf is going to happen on the third millennium, this is it's such a different backwards way of thinking about time. But since Kriyat Yamsuf, which is directly referenced in the third day, needs to happen in the third millennium, so we can't mention it on the second day of creation. So God couldn't put in the second day of creation the act that's referred to in the third day. Okay, what came first, past or the future? Basheni hayabilti efshar ki ech yirmos basheni masha hayati liyot ba'elav hashlishi. Al ken lo nigmar bo melachat hamayim. That's the reason why God did not finish fashioning, meaning all the work that needed to go into the water on the second day. V'lo ne'amar bo, and it doesn't say on the second day ki tov, that it was good, ad hashlishi. Okay, I imagine that if you wanted to, now that the Alshech gave you a hint, you can go back now in each of the days of creation. He's going to finish up. He's going to talk till Shabbat, but you can go back. There are many other aspects and details of these hints that you can see parallels, which are really beautiful. And I would encourage everybody to try that. Okay, v'hine bayom hashlishi, on the third day, hotzia haaretz eitz osepri. So what happened was, on the third day of creation, God said that the earth should, among the things that happened on the third day, God's asked that the earth should spring forth fruit trees, eitz peri osepri, a fruit tree that makes fruit. And a fruit tree that makes fruit, right, it sounds very superfluous. I could have just said a tree that makes fruit. So there's different ways of understanding that. One of the ways of understanding that is that the tree and the fruit should taste the same. Okay? What happened ultimately was that this did not happen. This was an incident that happened in creation that has some ramifications. But one way of understanding is that God wanted the fruit trees to actually taste like fruit. And in the end, what the earth manifested was just a tree that makes fruit. It was eitz peri osepri, but in the end it was just eitz osepri. But there's another approach. The approach is that God asked that the eitz peri osepri, that only fruit trees should make fruit, but on that first day of creation, even the non-fruit trees made fruit. Even the trees that are not there for bearing fruit, they also had fruit. So on the third day, where it says that the tree, that the earth produced trees that produce fruit, shehu hayoter mitkabel ma'amar Rabbi Pinchas b'Medrash, because there is a very nice, the preferred statement from Rabbi Pinchas in the Medrash, shehosifa latzivui, that the earth added to what God commanded. God only commanded that the fruit trees should make fruit. Ki hakadosh baruch hu amar eitz pri osepri, ki ha'etz pri, a fruit-bearing tree, bilvad, alone, yia osepri, should be the ones to make fruit. Ach, lo ilan esrak, but not trees that are meant for shade, or other kinds of trees, meaning not trees that are not naturally fruit-bearing trees. V'hi hosifa, and the earth added to what God commanded, vatotze, and it produced eitz, not just an eitz pri, but a regular eitz, which indeed was oseh pri. Shebli hayot eitz pri, haya oseh pri. Even if it wasn't a naturally fruit-bearing tree, it made fruit. Kain b'shilhei elef shlishi nivne bayit rishon. And so too, in the third millennium, the first temple was built. Kamforash Bagamara, like it explains in the Gemara, Ki az hazahav shebo haya oseh perot, because the gold in it would make fruit. Kemosha amruzal mizahav parvayim umigefen hazahav shaita oseh perot tadir. So they had decorations of golden grapes that would constantly make fruit. Chutz mitivan, beyond their nature. V'hu meyen ma shebeyom shlishi afilu ilanei srak asu perot, and that is a reference to this Rabbi Pinchas Medrash, that even things that naturally don't give fruit, on that day they gave fruit. V'gam la'omer she'avra ala tzivoy, and then there's a totally different opinion. The Chazal say just the opposite. God wanted that the trees that gave fruit should also taste like the fruit, and the earth did not listen, it only produced regular trees. So according to the opinion that said that the earth was over, it did not heed God's command. Ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu amar eitz pri oseh pri, that the tree itself should have the qualities of a fruit. She'etz atzmo yi'anecha, that you could eat the tree. V'hi lo asta, and she did not do that. Rather she just produced eitz oseh pri, a tree that makes fruit. Yiyeh haremes al gafnei hazav, that would be a hint to the golden grapes. She'agefen hayamin bilti oseh pri, that it was something of a variety that did not make fruit. V'sham etzmicha vaya'aseh pri, and there it bloomed and it created fruit, alechut hamakom, because of the quality of that special place that it was in. So it says that, the Rav is saying that either way that you understand what happened in creation, whether the earth did more than it was supposed to or less than it was supposed to, they both refer to this wondrous, marvelous situation of the first temple, that there was the supernatural ability it had, that things that inherently could not produce fruit did produce fruit. Okay, so even if you learned that the tree was supposed to taste like the fruit, this is still a reference to something that doesn't taste like the fruits that it produces. Okay, Ubayom Haravi, this brings us to the fourth day. What happened on the fourth day? God made the sun and the moon and the stars, and he hung them in the sky. And he said that this should be a delineation of times and holidays. And we should be able to tell time and holy time through it. Okay, so what does that correspond to in our history? There should be great lights in the firmament of the heavens. Who remes? This is a hint. In the fourth millennium, nivne b'hasheni, the second temple was made. Umeoros, if you'll notice, the word for luminaries in the verse is written without a vav. It's written chaser. It's written without a letter. Because we know that the second temple, sadly, was bereft of at least 10 regular miracles that occurred daily by the first temple. So even though it was a great light, the second temple, it was missing, it was lacking something. she'im shelo nidme al harishon lo ne'adar mimenu hitchabruto el hamikdash shel mala kasher haya berishon. And also, this is telling us that if it did not, it was not similar to the first temple, even though it was not similar in that regard, that it was missing, that it's written chaser, and it was missing things, lo ne'adar mimenu, it was not lacking from itself, hitchabruto, its connection, el hamikdash shel mala, to the supernal, the heavenly temple, kasher haya berishon, just like the first temple. Just like Solomon's Shlomo HaMelech's Beit HaMikdash was a physical guf, it was connected to the spiritual temple on high, where where the angel Michael is the Kohen Gadol, etc., etc. So too, the second Beit HaMikdash down here on earth was able to facilitate that on its level, even though it was lacking in the great qualities of the first Beit HaMikdash. Vizel, and this is what the verse means when it says, Et HaMa'or HaGadol, the great light, and Gadol here is also missing a vav. Hu Beit HaMikdash Shel Ma'ala, that's referring to the supernal home or temple of Hashem. Ve'et HaMa'or HaKaton, and the small luminary Shel Mata is referring to the physical temple downstairs. V'ka'asher b'ma'orot haya kitrug, and since we know the story with there was a little bit of some sort of argument between the ma'orot, right? The story with the sun and the moon. Kain binyan b'ayit sheni haya al yedei kitrug me'omot kanoda. So too, the second temple existed in a climate or an atmosphere of great harassment from the nations, as is known. And that's why, another reason why it spells the word luminary missing a letter. It's referring to both the things that the second temple didn't have, and also the fact that it was a climate of harassment. Kamdubar, as has been explained. O Yomar, or you could say alternatively, Kiba Elef Aravi, in the 4th millennium, Nimtsu Yachad Shnei Me'orot. We find two great luminaries together coexisting in the 4th millennium. What's that? Ha'echad Shenivna B'sof HaShlishi. The first one is the temple that was built at the end of the 3rd millennium. V'rov Mitziyuto B'Ravi, and most of its lifespan was in the 4th millennium. V'habayit HaSheni Shenivna B'Ravi. And the second temple, which was made in the 4th millennium, also. So they both refer, meaning the two Ma'orot refer to not just the heavenly temple and the lower temple, meaning the second temple, but the first temple and the second temple. Ksiv Ma'orot, and the reason why the word Ma'orot is lacking is, once again, to allude to those dimensions and qualities that were missing in the second temple. How are we doing for time?
It's 11 o'clock.
Okay. Should we do?
Are you nearly finishing to the?
Well, we have the 5th day and the 6th day and the 7th day.
Okay, let's try to finish it.
Okay. Uvayom Chamishi, and on the 5th day, the first Yom Chamishi, Nivru Hataninim Hagedolim, the great Taninim were created, the great beasts, the great monsters. Very mysterious what the Taninim are. Keneged HaMelachim, and this corresponds to the kingdoms Asher Gazru Shmados Behereg Rav Meharuge Malchut Be'elef HaChamishi. These are the kingdoms and the governments, the authorities that decreed against us. They made harsh decrees that we couldn't live a life of Torah, and they challenged us physically too with decrees of death. And they killed also, officially, they killed a great many tzaddikim, and especially the 10 martyrs. And this all corresponds to the 5th millennium. That's the hallmark of the 5th millennium. V'gam b'tchilas hashishi, and also in the beginning of the 6th day, heitzeru hamachios Yisrael, meaning since basically the fall of the second temple, right? Our history can be characterized by constant opposition and oppression, both spiritually and physically, from the various authorities and kingdoms of the world, and this will go well into the 6th millennium. Vizehu remez, and this is referred to in the verse when the verse in the 6th day talks about the creation of the beasts and the creepy crawlies. So vizehu remez behema varemes, beast and that which slinks or crawls. Shebitchilat Yom HaShishi, which is referenced in the beginning of the 6th. So basically, if we would interpret the description of the 6th day to correspond to the period of time that we're living in now, its hallmark are the beasts that oppress us. But you know what? It picks up halfway through on the 6th day, because it says, B'shishi atzmo, on the 6th day itself, that's when it says, Na'aseh Adam. Finally, let's have Adam. Let's do something with creation. Remez, this is a hint, Leven David, to the son of David, Habo Be'elef HaShishi, who will come in the 6th millennium. Hu Adam Atzmo Kanoda, he is the man himself. Adam Harishon, he is the tikkun of all of man. Ki al ken natan le David shivim shana mishnei chayev. Remember that David himself received his 70 years from Adam Harishon and his life. Ki hu, because he be the same, right? Adam stands for Adam, David, Mashiach. Okay, v'gam hu Mashiachenu haba, and this will be the same individual, practically speaking, who will appear in the 6th millennium, be'elef hashishi, v'yerd miyam ad yam, and he will descend from ocean to ocean, uminahar, and from river ad afse aretz, to the ends of the earth, b'chol ha'omot, where any nations of the earth are populate, kanirmas ba'amro, like the verse hints when it says v'yirdu b'gas hayam, that man should descend, right, to the oceans to the fish of the oceans, right? V'yitzdak lefiza, meaning at the end of the sixth day, God says that, or when God says, let us make man, he describes that the goal of man, or the role of man, will be to go from the edges of the earth and all the way to the depths of the ocean, and that he should implement his authority on them. V'yitzdak lefiza, and it would be correct according to this Amro when it says v'yirdu, and man plural. V'yirdu is plural, right? That he will descend. Lashon rabim, that's a word plural. Al ki haremes la'atid hu l'chol Yisrael, because this is a reference that ultimately all of Am Yisrael, not just the initial appearance of a Messiah, but ultimately all of Am Yisrael will manifest this idea and be Adam. V'gam lo niskar ata avan Adam, and it's not even mentioned at all over here in this telling of the sin of Adam, which is what happened on the sixth day. But in this part of the narrative, when it talks about what God did, God doesn't mention at all the sin of Adam. L'masha lo yisaper ata, right? Why should it not mention it over here? Ela mashu remez al tova ha'atida, because it's only interested in hinting to you on the good, the future good, B'melech HaMashiach, with the king, the anointed king, Hanirmas Ba'Adam, who is hinted at in the character of Adam. Ki im acher sipor ma'alot shivat hayamim. It's only after we complete the telling of the narrative of the 7 days that we get to that story. Ve'achar yom hashishi b'Shabbat, and after the sixth day comes Shabbos, remez al hamnucha. This is referring to the great rest, Shabbat Hashvi, which is on the 7th millennium. Looking forward, I think we have like 200 and how many years? Let's see, it's 5783. And we got to get to 6,000. You can do the math. I heard that perhaps we're missing 82 years or something like that. But either way, I hope that cryogenics and all kinds of biological technology gets us there. Anyway, just kidding. Thank you. Chodesh Tov.